In a blackout at a small town supper, a grieving widow clutches the edge of a table as a stranger fixes an old piano, and the room breathes again. "Don't stop," she whispers. He doesn't. By morning, an anonymous gift saves the community center, but the quiet handyman isn't who he seems. He's a billionaire hiding in plain sight, carrying a brother's secret and a promise he can't keep running from. When powerful people move to erase the center, kindness turns into a public fight, smears, a rigged inspection, and a hearing that could shut the doors for good. Yet the widow, a child with a feelings map, and a weary pastor refuse to back down. Then the billionaire does one thing no one expects, something so open, so costly, it makes the whole town cry. What happens when mercy goes public, and the richest man in the room gives away the one thing they can't take back? The wind howled against the community center's old windows as Pastor Ruth's voice cut through the darkness, firm but reassuring. "Everyone stay where you are, children. We'll have lights in just a moment." Her silhouette barely visible in the blackout, she moved with practiced ease toward the emergency kit. Thunder cracked overhead with a deafening boom, making several kids gasp and a few of the younger ones whimper. In the kitchen, Olivia's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the soup ladle, the cold metal pressing into her palm. The familiar weight of grief pressed against her chest. This was usually when the evening's hymns would start playing, filling the space with comfort and drowning out memories that threatened to surface. Now there was only the storm and worried murmurs, the absence of music making the darkness feel somehow heavier. "It's okay," she called out, trying to inject confidence into her voice despite the knot in her stomach. "Remember what we practiced during the fire drill. Just stay seated." Battery-powered lanterns began to flicker to life around the room, one by one like earthbound stars, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor with its faded yellow pattern. The warm light revealed concerned faces at the tables, steam rising from bowls of soup in the dim glow. Children clutched their plastic spoons, eyes wide and uncertain, while volunteer servers moved carefully between tables with reassuring touches on small shoulders. A faint bluish light appeared near the old upright piano in the corner, the glow bouncing off the ceiling. Olivia squinted through the darkness, making out a figure in a worn baseball cap kneeling by the instrument. His phone's flashlight illuminated his careful movements as he removed the wooden panel above the keys, revealing the intricate innards of the ancient piano. Dust motes danced in the beam of light. "What are you doing?" a small voice asked. One of the younger kids who'd wandered over, curiosity overcoming fear. Her pigtails caught the light as she peered down at his hands. "Just unkinking the action," the man replied softly. His voice was gentle, steady, like someone used to explaining things to children. Sometimes these old pianos get stuck when the weather changes. The humidity makes the wood swell up a little bit. He gestured to the felt-covered hammers and complex mechanisms inside. His hands moved with quiet confidence over the exposed mechanisms, fingers navigating the wooden parts and metal strings with the familiarity of an old friendship. Then, carefully, he pressed a single key. The note rang clear and true through the darkness, the G above middle C vibrating perfectly. Slowly, deliberately, his fingers found their way to more keys, and the opening notes of "Amazing Grace" filled the room, soft at first, then building with quiet strength. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. The familiar melody wrapped around her like a warm blanket, pushing back against the heaviness in her chest. The music seemed to find all the cracks in her armor, slipping through to touch places she kept carefully guarded. She set down the ladle with a small clink against the metal pot and walked closer to the piano, drawn by the music and the strange peace it brought. her footsteps muffled by the sound of rain pounding the roof. "Don't stop. I need this," she whispered, barely loud enough to be heard over the rain, surprised by her own honesty. The man didn't look up, but his playing continued, smooth and sure, his shoulders relaxing slightly at her words. Only the edge of his profile was visible beneath the cap, but something in his posture suggested he understood exactly what she meant. Around the room, children began to hum along, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. The sound grew stronger as more voices joined in, creating a spontaneous chorus that seemed to hold the storm at bay. Marley, Olivia's daughter, crawled under the piano, her bright yellow raincoat rustling as she settled beneath it, her face lit by wonder as she looked up at the instrument's inner workings. 1, 2, 3. Marley counted, watching the hammers move inside the piano with fascination. 78, 79. Her clear voice carried underneath the music, the childlike precision of her counting, making Olivia smile despite herself. This was so typical of her daughter, finding patterns and numbers even in moments of beauty. The man in the cap played through several more hymns, each one flowing naturally into the next without pause. "How great thou art! It is well with my soul, this little light of mine." His hands never faltered, though the only light came from scattered lanterns, and his phone's dim glow propped against the music stand. There was something both skilled and humble in the way he played, as if the music was a gift he was offering without expecting anything in return. No flourishes or showing off, just pure melody carrying emotion through the darkened room. At 7:03, the emergency lights flickered on with a low hum, bathing everything in harsh fluorescent white. The sudden brightness made everyone blink and shield their eyes. In the confusion of adjusting eyes and relieved chatter, the mystery pianist quietly closed the fallboard with a gentle thud and slipped away, tucking his phone into his pocket. By the time Olivia turned to thank him, there was only the closing door and the sound of rain pounding the pavement outside. "Wait," she called, but her voice was lost in the general commotion as the center returned to normal activity. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of clean-up tasks and reassurances to parents arriving to collect their children. As Olivia wiped down tables with circular motions, her mind kept returning to the music, to that moment when grief and hope had somehow occupied the same space without cancelling each other out. The melody still echoed in her memory, making her wonder if she'd imagined the entire thing. This stranger appearing exactly when needed, playing exactly what her heart had been missing. "Ready to go home, sweetie?" she called to Marley, who was finishing a drawing at one of the clean tables, tongue poking out in concentration as she added final touches. "Can we come back Saturday?" Marley asked, gathering her crayons and carefully placing them back in their box by color families. "Pastor Ruth said they need help cleaning the storage closets and fixing the bookshelves." Pastor Ruth appeared with a large black umbrella, her grey hair neatly tucked into a practical bun. "You two live on Cedar Street, right? Let me walk you home. This rain isn't letting up." She zipped her weathered jacket up to her chin. "Besides, I could use the company." They huddled together under the umbrella, splashing through puddles in the gathering dark, streetlights reflecting in the water. Olivia held Marley's hand, feeling its warm certainty in hers, small fingers gripping with complete trust. "Of course we can come back Saturday," she told her daughter, squeezing the little hand gently. "We'll help make everything shine. Maybe we can organize the art supplies too." The storm continued its symphony overhead, rain drumming patterns on the umbrella, but it felt less threatening now. Something had changed in that hour of darkness, not just the weather, but something inside her too. Like an old piano being carefully tuned, note by note, until the music could flow freely again. For the first time in months, Olivia felt a tiny spark of anticipation for what might come next. The morning sun cast long shadows across Olivia's welcome mat as she opened her apartment door, juggling her teacher's bag and travel mug. A cream-colored envelope caught her eye, lying perfectly centered on the mat. No return address, just her name in neat handwriting and a local postmark. "Marley, honey, did you pack your lunch?" She called back inside, picking up the envelope. It felt substantial in her hands. "Already in my backpack." Marley's voice rang out from her bedroom, followed by the sound of crayons being dumped into their container. Olivia's fingers trembled slightly as she opened the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check that made her breath catch. The amount was enough to keep the community center running for 3 months. A simple note accompanied it. "For what the songs have carried." She had to read the numbers 3 times before they felt real. "Marley, time to go, sweetie." The drive to school was a blur of morning traffic and half-heard radio news. Olivia's mind kept returning to the check in her purse, its weight seeming to grow with each passing minute. After dropping Marley off, she drove straight to the community center, arriving just after 9. Pastor Ruth was in her office with Ms. Alvarez, the elderly choir leader whose silver hair was always perfectly styled despite the humidity. They were discussing storm damage when Olivia knocked. "Come in, dear," Pastor Ruth called. "You're just in time to help us inventory the leak spots." "I found something this morning," Olivia said, pulling out the envelope. "It was on my doorstep." The 3 women huddled around Pastor Ruth's desk as she examined the check and note. Ms. Alvarez adjusted her reading glasses, letting out a small gasp at the amount. "We should verify this immediately," Pastor Ruth said, reaching for her phone. She called the bank manager, putting him on speaker. After several minutes of verification codes and security questions, he confirmed. The check was legitimate. Who would make such a generous anonymous donation? Ms. Alvarez wondered, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Maybe we should keep it that way," Olivia suggested. "Anonymous, I mean, to avoid any fuss or pressure on the donor." Pastor Ruth nodded slowly. "Agreed. The last thing we need is people camping out hoping for handouts. This is about the center, about keeping our doors open." By noon, volunteers had begun arriving for storm cleanup. The morning sunshine had dried most of the puddles, but water stains marked the ceiling in several spots. The piano sat quietly in its corner, somehow looking more dignified than before. The piano tuner arrived at 1:30, right on schedule, an appointment made months ago. He was a small man with wire-rimmed glasses who introduced himself as Mr. Chen. His eyebrows rose as he examined the piano's action. "Someone's been in here recently," he said, testing a few keys. "Someone who knew what they were doing. The action's been adjusted quite skillfully." Olivia thought of the mysterious piano player from the night before but said nothing. At 4 o'clock, heavy boots crossed the threshold. A man in worn jeans and a clean work shirt introduced himself as Ethan, carrying a professional-looking toolbox. "I live nearby," he said simply. "Heard you might need help with some roof leaks on Saturday. I'm good with repairs." Ms. Alvarez, arranging sheet music nearby, looked up sharply. Something flickered across her face. Recognition, perhaps. But she remained silent, watching as Ethan knelt to help a small boy with an untied shoelace. "There you go, buddy," he said quietly, double-knotting the laces with careful precision. "That should hold better now." The day wound down as the sun began to set. Olivia and Marley walked home through town, passing familiar storefronts and new construction sites. Real estate signs dotted empty lots. "Riverview Luxury coming soon," their glossy surfaces proclaimed in bold letters. Olivia barely noticed them, her mind still on the morning's mysterious gift. After a simple dinner of mac and cheese, Olivia tucked Marley into bed at 8:30. The little girl was already half asleep, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. Back in the kitchen, Olivia pulled out the envelope again, reading the note one more time. For what the songs have carried. The words seemed to hold more meaning now, after a day of seeing how much the center meant to so many people. She stood on tiptoe to reach the highest kitchen shelf, sliding the envelope carefully under her grandmother's old cookbook. It felt like hiding treasure, which in a way it was. Not just the money itself, but the hope it represented. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, but for now, this gift felt like a small miracle, as unexpected and welcome as last night's piano music in the dark. Saturday morning dawned bright and cool, the storms of Thursday now just a memory. By 8 o'clock, the community center's parking lot was filling with volunteers' cars and pickup trucks loaded with tools and supplies. Ethan arrived wearing the same worn baseball cap, his toolbox even more organized than yesterday. He headed straight for the ladder propped against the building's side, ready to tackle the leaky roof seams that had plagued the center all spring. Inside, Olivia directed a group of teenage volunteers around tables piled high with donated winter coats. Sort by size first, she explained, demonstrating with a small red jacket. Then we'll check for repairs needed. Marley had claimed her own corner of the main room, spreading a long sheet of butcher paper across the floor. Her markers squeaked as she drew bold lines dividing the paper into sections, each carefully labeled with both colors and emotions. "This is the feelings map," she announced to anyone who passed by. "Blue is for happy, like when Mum makes pancakes. Gray is for tired, like after math class. And gold—" She paused, considering carefully. "Gold is for brave, like when you try something scary but do it anyway." The morning hummed with activity. Ethan moved methodically across the roof, applying sealant with precise care. When he came down to get more supplies, he noticed Marley studying a squeaky door hinge. "Want to learn how to fix that?" he asked, kneeling beside her. Marley nodded eagerly. Ethan pulled a small oil can from his toolbox and showed her how to apply just the right amount. "See? Not too much, or it'll drip. Just enough to help the metal parts move smooth again." Olivia watched from across the room, noting how he spoke to Marley at eye level, never rushing or dismissing her questions. She saw the same patience when he helped Mrs. Chen, their eldest volunteer, unstick her chair's wheels, or showed the younger kids how to sort screws by size. By late morning, the old piano's bench had been transformed. The cracked vinyl was replaced with sturdy blue fabric, the wood beneath refinished to a warm glow. Ethan produced a small wheel from his pocket, a perfect match for the missing caster. "Found it at Henderson's Hardware this morning," he said simply, installing it with practiced movements. Pastor Ruth gathered a small group near her office, speaking in low tones. "Good news," she said. "The landlords agreed to extend our payment timeline. It seems an angel's gift has given us some breathing room." Her eyes met Olivia's briefly, acknowledging their shared secret. The afternoon brought unexpected news. At 1:15, phones across the room buzzed with a city notification. Olivia read the message aloud. "Urgent community land use presentation, Monday at 6 p.m., City Hall." "What do you suppose that means?" someone asked. "Could be anything," Pastor Ruth replied. "Zoning changes, development plans." The question hung in the air, but work continued. At 3 o'clock, Ms. Alvarez approached the piano where Ethan was adjusting the pedal alignment. "Do you play?" she asked softly. "A little," he admitted. After a moment's hesitation, he sat at the keys. The hymn that filled the room was familiar, the same one from Thursday night, played with the same gentle touch that had steadied them in the darkness. Olivia's hands stilled in her work. The realization washed over her. He was the man from that night, the one who had brought music to their fear. She caught his eye as he finished playing. "Thank you," she said simply, letting the words carry meaning for both times he had played. He nodded, understanding in his slight smile, and returned to his repairs without further discussion. By 5:30 the day's work was winding down. Volunteers gathered around the kitchen, sharing bowls of leftover soup and trading stories of the day's accomplishments. The setting sun painted the windows gold, matching the brave section of Marley's feelings map. "Need a ride?" Olivia offered as Ethan packed his tools. He shook his head. "Thanks, but I like walking, especially along the river this time of day." As he headed out, Olivia watched him choose the path that wound along the water's edge. She made a mental note to bring extra muffins on Monday, a small thanks for all the volunteers before they faced whatever news awaited at the council meeting. Marley stood at her feelings map, marker in hand. She added a small star in the gold section, right where brave met happy. "For fixing things?" Olivia asked. "For everyone, helping," Marley replied. "That's both brave and happy, isn't it?" Olivia couldn't argue with that logic. She helped Marley gather her art supplies, both of them tired but content with the day's work. The centre looked better than it had in months. Doors swinging smoothly, roof sealed tight, piano standing proud in its corner, ready for whatever Monday might bring. Monday morning dawned cool and clear. At 7 o'clock, Olivia stood in her small kitchen, carefully wrapping Marley's sandwich in wax paper. The morning light streamed through the window, catching the tiny dust motes dancing in the air as she worked. She tucked a shiny red apple and 2 homemade chocolate chip cookies into the lunchbox, adding a small note with a drawn heart and the words, "Have a wonderful day," written in her neat handwriting. "Ready for school, sweetie?" She called down the narrow hallway, glancing at the clock on the wall. Marley appeared, backpack already strapped on, her hair pulled back in slightly uneven pigtails that she'd insisted on doing herself. "Can I bring my feelings map to show Ms. Thompson?" she asked, her eyes bright with anticipation. She clutched the colourful paper in her small hands, the corners already softly worn from frequent handling. "Of course," Olivia replied with a warm smile. She helped her daughter roll the precious artwork carefully, securing it with a bright blue rubber band. "Ms. Thompson will love seeing how you express your emotions through colour." After dropping Marley at school at 7:45, joining the line of parents' cars and waving until her daughter disappeared through the double doors, Olivia drove to the community centre. The morning sun caught the newly sealed roof, making the old building look almost proud, like it had put on its Sunday best. The familiar brick exterior seemed to glow with renewed dignity against the backdrop of blue sky. She carried a clear Tupperware container filled with fresh blueberry muffins into the quiet building. The aroma of baked goods and lemon floor cleaner mingled in the air. On a small table near the tool area, where sawdust still sprinkled the floor from yesterday's repairs, she left a foil-wrapped plate with a neat label written in blue marker. "For the handyman. Thank you for all you do." Throughout the day, worried conversations echoed through town like ripples in a pond. At the grocery store, Mrs. Chen whispered to her friend about relocating the centre while arranging apples in her cart. "They say it'll be good for property values," she murmured, though her furrowed brow suggested otherwise. Outside the post office, 2 men in work boots discussed demolition plans for condos, their voices carrying across the parking lot. 30 units minimum, the taller one said, spreading his hands wide to indicate the scale. Each roomer carried a different version of the same fear. Change was coming, uninvited and unstoppable, rolling over their community like a silent tide. By 5:30, with Marley safely at a playdate with her friend Emma, Olivia joined a growing crowd on the City Hall steps. The evening sun cast long shadows across the concrete as people gathered in clusters, exchanging nervous glances and hushed conversations. Pastor Ruth stood nearby, her grey hair caught in the breeze, her usual calm presence tinged with concern. She nodded reassuringly to each familiar face that arrived. Ms. Alvarez had brought several of her choir seniors, their familiar faces drawn with worry beneath colourful scarves and well-worn hats. They huddled together like birds on a wire, drawing strength from proximity. At the edge of the gathering, partially hidden by shadow, stood Ethan. His faded denim jacket and quiet stance made him nearly invisible to the bustling crowd. He leaned against a pillar, watching everything with attentive eyes that missed nothing. The council chamber filled quickly with bodies and tension. At 6:05, Councilman Darius Cole strode to the podium, his confidence filling the room like expensive cologne. His perfectly pressed navy suit and practiced smile suggested a man used to getting his way. He adjusted his red tie and surveyed the crowd with a politician's practiced gaze. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, gesturing to a screen behind him with a manicured hand. "I'm excited to present the future of our Riverside district, a transformation that will put our town on the map." The images that appeared drew collective gasps. Sleek glass buildings rose where the community center currently stood, their modern lines reflecting the river in computer-generated perfection. The words Riverview Residences floated above renderings of upscale shops with elegant awnings and manicured paths where fashionable people strolled with shopping bags. "Of course," Darius continued smoothly, his voice rich with reassurance. "We understand the importance of community services. We promise to relocate these programs to a more suitable off-site location. Progress requires flexibility, after all." A low murmur rippled through the crowd, like wind through tall grass. Near the front, an older man in a veteran's cap shook his head, the fluorescent lights reflecting off his silver hair. "You don't move an anchor," he said, voice rough with emotion. "That place has held us steady for 40 years. Olivia felt her heart pounding against her ribs as she stood. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides, but her voice carried clear and strong across the hushed room. "The center isn't just a building," she began, feeling every eye turn toward her. "It's where children get free lunches when school's out, where recovery meetings save lives every Tuesday and Thursday, where seniors find company and purpose when loneliness threatens to overwhelm." She took a breath, drawing courage from the familiar faces nodding in agreement. Just last Thursday, when the storm knocked out power, a simple hymn played in the dark kept everyone calm and safe. "You can't put that in a spreadsheet." A commotion near the back interrupted her carefully chosen words. A man with a phone held high above the crowd pointed toward Ethan, excitement crackling in his voice. "Wait, isn't that Vale, the tech billionaire, the founder of Greenscale Systems?" The room erupted in whispers and shifting bodies as cameras turned and necks craned. Ethan's face tightened almost imperceptibly beneath the sudden attention, but he gave a single, slight nod. His jaw tensed visibly. Neither confirming nor denying, but the damage was done. The secret was out. Darius's smirk grew wider, his eyes glinting with newfound interest. "Rest assured," he said over the noise, raising his voice to reclaim control. "This will be a completely transparent process. We welcome input from all stakeholders, especially those with significant resources." His gaze lingered meaningfully on Ethan. At 7:12, the chair's gavel came down hard, ending the chaos with a sharp crack that echoed through the chamber. People spilled onto the steps, emotions running high in the evening air. Voices rose and fell like waves, some angry, some frightened, all uncertain. "Rich outsider?" someone snarled in Ethan's direction, the words cutting through the general murmur. Probably here to buy up everything. But a mother with 2 small children, their hands clutched tightly in hers, moved closer to him. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes sincere behind smudged glasses. "For fixing our roof. My kids stayed dry during the storm." Before tensions could escalate further, Olivia stepped between the groups, her teacher's instincts taking over. "We're one town," she said firmly, her voice carrying natural authority that made several heads turn. "We need to stick together if we want to be heard." Pastor Ruth gathered their core group as the crowd dispersed into the deepening twilight. Her weathered hands gestured emphatically as she spoke. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice steady and determined. "We'll meet at 9 at the center and make a plan. This isn't over. It's just beginning." The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the City Hall steps. The evening air carried the scent of spring flowers and approaching rain, a reminder that some things remained constant even as others threatened to change. Above them, stars began to appear in the darkening sky, watching silently over the town at its crossroads. The morning sun filtered through the center's dusty office windows, casting long shadows across the worn carpet. At 8:30 sharp, Pastor Ruth settled into her creaky desk chair, while others found spots on mismatched furniture. Mr. Garcia and Bill Thompson, both veterans wearing their service caps, took the small couch. Ms. Alvarez perched on a folding chair, her silver hair neatly pinned back. Olivia sat cross-legged on an old ottoman, while Ethan stood near the door, hands in his pockets. The silence felt heavy with unspoken questions until Pastor Ruth cleared her throat. "Well, we're all here, and some things need saying." Ethan stepped forward, removing his cap. "I should start." His voice was quiet but steady. "Yes, I sent the check. And yes, I'm who they said I am. But that doesn't matter here." "Doesn't it?" Mr. Garcia asked, not unkindly. "That's quite a secret you've been keeping." "I prefer to help quietly," Ethan replied. "And I'd like to keep doing that if you'll let me. But the decisions about this place should stay local, with the people who built it." Olivia watched his face carefully. There was something in his expression, not guilt exactly, but a deep responsibility that seemed personal. "I'll match whatever the community raises," he continued. "Dollar for dollar. No naming rights, no corporate sponsorship, just support." Pastor Ruth nodded slowly. "That's generous. But we need more than money. We need to show people why this place matters." Olivia sat up straighter, an idea taking shape. "What if we started Fix-It Fridays?" The words tumbled out eagerly. Every Friday evening, people bring things that need fixing. Broken toasters, wobbly bikes, even resumes that need work. Our seniors could teach teenagers practical skills. Ms. Alvarez's eyes lit up. "Like how my father taught me to repair radios." "Exactly," Olivia continued. "And we end each night with soup and songs. 2 songs, maybe from different traditions each time." Bill Thompson smiled. "I could teach basic car maintenance. Lord knows these young folks need it." "This Friday at 6, Pastor Ruth decided, marking it in her calendar. "We'll start small but steady." Ms. Alvarez smoothed her skirt, eyes twinkling. "And in 2 weeks we could have a rededication concert. Bring everyone together, show what's possible here. Maybe raise some matching funds." Ethan stepped closer to the group. "The roof needs immediate attention before we can do any of that. I'll cover those repairs now, while we get bids for the bigger fixes." They spent the next hour planning details, what tools they'd need, how to organize the teaching stations, who would make the soup. The mood lightened with each practical decision, hope building like a harmony. After the meeting, Olivia headed to school, her art supplies rattling in her bag. Between classes, she designed bright flyers. "Fix-It Fridays. Bring what's broken, leave with hope. She added cheerful drawings of tools and music notes around the edges. By evening, volunteers spread across Main Street with stacks of flyers. Mrs. Chen taped one in her grocery store window. The hardware store owner took a handful for the counter. Even the coffee shop, usually particular about postings, gave the announcement prime space. Olivia got home late, tired but content. After tucking Marley in, she knelt beside her own bed at 9:45. Her prayer was simple, honest. If this is good, let it last. Miles away, in a modest rental cottage overlooking the river, Ethan sat at his kitchen table. A shoebox lay open before him, its contents carefully arranged. A folded program from the community center, yellowed with age. A sobriety coin, its edge chipped from years of nervous handling. And a choir lyric sheet, bearing old grease stains from his brother Ben's mechanic days. He touched each item gently, memories washing over him. The attention from being recognized would be uncomfortable, but he could handle that. The center needed to survive, not just for the community, but for all the future Bens who might find hope there. Opening his laptop, he composed a quick email to his attorney. Research community land trusts as potential option for Maple Street Center property. Initial research only for now. Need to understand viability. The river murmured outside his window, its steady flow a reminder that some things could remain constant even in times of change. He carefully returned Ben's mementos to their box, each item a reason to keep fighting for this cause. Wednesday dawned cool and bright, the kind of spring morning that promised possibility. Sunlight streamed through the classroom windows, casting golden rectangles across the desks where Olivia guided her art students through the delicate process of folding paper cranes, demonstrating each careful crease with patient hands. Like this? Tommy asked, his tongue poking out in concentration as he smoothed a fold with his small fingers. His brow furrowed with the seriousness only a third grader could bring to origami. Perfect. Olivia nodded, moving between the desks, pausing here to straighten a corner, there to encourage a frustrated student. Remember, gentle hands make beautiful things. That's it, don't rush. The paper knows when you're hurrying. The classroom filled with rustling paper and quiet concentration, punctuated by occasional sighs and whispered exclamations of triumph. Some cranes emerged slightly crumpled, wings askew and heads tilting at odd angles. Others appeared surprisingly elegant, as if ready to take flight from small palms. Each one carried its maker's determination, a physical manifestation of focus and hope. "Miss Jensen, look at mine," Sophia called from the back row, holding up a pristine white crane. "Can we paint them tomorrow?" "That's a wonderful idea," Olivia replied, already imagining the rainbow of birds that would soon hang from the classroom ceiling. "We'll make them truly your own." At 3:15, with the classroom quiet and crane-free, Olivia sat across from Mrs. Peterson in a child-sized chair that made her knees rise awkwardly toward her chin. They were discussing Emily's progress in art class, the conference table between them scattered with colorful evidence of growth. "She's really blossoming," Olivia explained, spreading out a portfolio of Emily's work with genuine pride. Her fingers traced the evolution visible across the pages. Her use of color is becoming more confident. See how she used to stick to just primary colors? Now look at these subtle greens and purples. She's discovering her artistic voice. Mrs. Peterson leaned forward, glasses perched on the end of her nose. "She talks about your class at dinner every night. It's the only subject she discusses willingly." "Art gives her a safe place to express herself," Olivia said, smiling at a particularly vibrant painting of what appeared to be a family of dinosaurs having a picnic. After the conference, Olivia hurried down the school hallway, her tote bag bumping against her hip as she checked her watch. She pushed through the heavy front doors and made her way to Main Street Print Shop, the bell above the entrance chiming merrily as she entered the ink-scented space. "Hi, Joe," she called to the man behind the counter, his fingers permanently stained with printer's ink. "Here for the Fix-It Friday flyers." "Just finished 'em," Joe replied with satisfaction, pulling out a stack of vibrant papers from behind the counter. He spread one out for her inspection, his weathered hands surprisingly gentle. "Added extra blue like you asked. Really makes the tools pop. Even threw in 20 extra copies. No charge." Olivia's face brightened. "You're a lifesaver. These are perfect." Meanwhile, at the community center, Ethan balanced on a stepladder, replacing the cracked exit sign above the side door. His movements were precise, methodical, each turn of the screwdriver deliberate and sure. Sweat beaded at his temples, despite the cool air flowing through the propped door. He checked his phone, confirming the order for fire safety bulbs. They'd arrive tomorrow. Priority shipping. He'd paid extra for the expedited delivery, though no one needed to know that particular detail. The afternoon mellowed into evening as Ms. Alvarez's choir gathered in the main room. Their voices filled the space, rising and falling in familiar patterns, bouncing off the walls and creating a cocoon of harmony. They practiced Amazing Grace, the same arrangement Ben had sung years ago, his tenor voice now a bittersweet memory in the familiar notes. Ethan, fixing a loose doorknob nearby, paused at the opening notes, his hands going still on the metal hardware. Ms. Alvarez caught his eye briefly across the room, a gentle understanding passing between them. She nodded slightly, acknowledging his presence and the weight of the moment without drawing attention. Again from the third verse. She instructed the choir, her hands moving through the air like she was weaving the harmonies together, fingers dancing on invisible strings. Remember to breathe at the phrase endings. The silence between the notes matters just as much as the sound. In her office down the hall, Pastor Ruth pulled an old cardboard box from beneath a shelf, dust dancing in the late sunlight that slanted through her window. The label read, "Ledger's Volunteer Hours," in faded marker, the handwriting belonging to someone long gone from the center. She placed it deliberately on her desk, ready for tomorrow's review, her fingers lingering briefly on the lid as if connecting with the history it contained. Evening settled over the town like a soft blanket, streetlights flickering on one by one, windows glowing amber against the deepening blue. In their apartment, Olivia and Marley sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by warm laundry fresh from the dryer, the clean scent of detergent filling the small space. Marley folded washcloths into neat triangles while telling her mother about the school play, her small hands working with surprising precision. Her dark hair fell forward, framing her concentrated expression. "Ms. Thompson says I'd make a good tree," Marley announced, arranging socks in pairs with methodical care. "Trees are important. They hold up the whole forest. They don't have a lot of words to say, but they're still part of the story." "That they do," Olivia agreed, smoothing a pillowcase with practiced hands. "Just like you held up that end of the banner at school today. Sometimes the quiet jobs are the most important ones." Marley paused, holding a t-shirt against her chest, her eyes thoughtful. "Will the man with soft hands come on Friday? The one who showed me about the door? His hands look rough, but they're actually gentle." "Yes, Ethan will be there," Olivia replied, smiling at her daughter's perceptive description. She tucked a strand of hair behind Marley's ear. "We're all bringing something to fix." She gestured to the bent coat rack leaning in the corner, its hooks askew but still hopeful, waiting for a second chance. "Think our old friend will survive another repair job? Maybe this time," Marley said seriously. "Sometimes things need to be fixed more than once." At 9:10, with Marley tucked into bed, and the apartment quiet save for the hum of the refrigerator, Olivia reached for her phone, thumbs tapping out a quick message to Pastor Ruth. "Still okay to unlock at 5 tomorrow for setup? Bringing coffee and muffins for the early crew?" The response came quickly. A thumbs-up emoji followed by, "God willing, kiddo. Doors and heart open, as always." Across town, in his riverside cottage with its simple furnishings and complex tools, Ethan moved through his evening routine. He wiped down his workbench, checked his supplies for tomorrow's repairs, and prepared the coffee maker for morning. The day's tasks settled in his mind like sediment in still water, forming a foundation for tomorrow's work. At 10:02 he switched off his lamp, letting darkness fill the room except for the silver ribbon of moonlight on the hardwood floor. Outside his window, the river whispered its endless song, a constant companion in the quiet night. The bent coat rack waited in Olivia's hallway. Pastor Ruth's box of ledgers sat ready on her desk. All across town, people were preparing what they'd bring to Fix It Friday. Broken toasters, wobbly chairs, fraying hope. Tomorrow would bring its own work, its own challenges and unexpected moments of grace. But for now, the town rested under a canopy of stars, held together by shared purpose and the promise of repair. Thursday morning light filtered through the center's windows, casting long shadows across Pastor Ruth's desk, illuminating dust motes that danced in the golden beams. At 10 o'clock sharp, she lifted the lid of the old cardboard box labeled Ledgers, the musty scent of aged paper rising to meet her like an old friend's greeting from years past. Her fingers moved methodically through the folders, the familiar touch of weathered manila against her skin, until she found a volunteer sign-in sheet from 6 years ago. There, in neat handwriting that spoke of care and precision. Ben Vale, kitchen help, 4 hours. The entries continued for several weeks, each one documenting quiet service, then stopped abruptly mid-page. Pastor Ruth touched the final entry gently, her fingertips lingering on the faded blue ink, remembering the quiet young man with the shadowed eyes who'd found temporary shelter in their community kitchen, always arriving early and leaving late. "Lord, give me wisdom for this one," she murmured, carefully setting the sheet aside on the corner of her worn desk for a conversation that would need careful handling, one that would touch old wounds not fully healed. At noon, the center's ancient computer, with its perpetually dusty screen and tendency to wheeze when overworked, chimed with new email. Pastor Ruth adjusted her reading glasses and clicked open 3 identical messages from First State Bank, each declining microloan applications from program graduates. The reason stung like salt in a fresh cut. Unstable address history. All 3 applicants had lived at the center's transitional housing address during recovery, working diligently towards stability that the bank now refused to recognize. Olivia, checking email between her art classes while her students washed brushes in the sink behind her, felt heat rise in her cheeks and a familiar tightness in her chest. By 2:30, after sketching and discarding 3 drafts, she'd crafted a public social media post, her teacher's precision making each word count like stones in a carefully built wall. Today, 3 of our neighbors were denied small business loans. Each has completed job training. Each has savings. Each maintains steady employment. Their crime: living at our center's address while rebuilding their lives. We respectfully ask First State Bank to reconsider what stability truly means. Perhaps it's found in determination, not geography. She included anonymous stories that painted portraits of resilience without revealing identities. A veteran learning computer repair after 3 tours overseas. A single mom starting a cleaning service while raising 2 children. A former addict now certified in HVC work who hadn't missed a day of work in 14 months. The post spread quickly through the town's online groups, shared from screen to screen, bouncing between phones and computers. By 4 o'clock, elderly residents began commenting, their digital voices carrying the weight of decades in the community. Mrs. Davidson, with her arthritic hands that made typing difficult, posted first. Paid off my mortgage with First State in 1982 from the same address they're calling unstable. She attached a photo of a yellowed mortgage satisfaction letter, the corners soft with age. More followed in a cascade of community memory. Mr. Chen, whose family owned the corner market. 3 generations, same unstable address, all mortgages paid full. Screenshot attached of 3 certificates hanging proudly in his shop window. The bank's public relations team surely noticed the mounting pressure, as notification after notification must have pinged on their monitors, each one adding another voice to the chorus. At 5:10, as the afternoon light began to soften into early evening, Ethan walked through the center's side door, toolbox in hand, his work boots leaving faint, dusty prints on the recently mopped floor. He found Ms. Alvarez, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun, directing volunteers arranging folding tables for tomorrow's Fix-It Friday event. That corner, Ms. Alvarez said softly, touching Ethan's arm with a weathered hand and pointing to a spot near the upright piano with its chipped ivory keys. Your brother sang Amazing Grace right there at the Christmas program. Such a clear voice he had, like water running over stones, so pure. Ethan's eyes brightened with sudden tears that caught him off guard, the unexpected memory hitting like a physical blow. He nodded once, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. Finding a wobbly table nearby with one leg shorter than the others, he knelt and began tightening its leg, grateful for the familiar motion of wrench against bolt, the solid physics of metal on metal when emotions felt so uncontrollable. "Thank you," he managed finally, his voice rough as sandpaper, "for remembering him that way." The evening settled into familiar routines as the center quieted. At 7, Olivia walked with Marley down their familiar blocks home, the spring air soft around them, carrying the scent of newly mown grass and someone's charcoal grill. "Tomorrow's the big night," Marley said, skipping alongside her mother, her sneakers lighting up with each enthusiastic step. "Can we make pancakes before? The ones with blueberry faces?" "You bet!" Olivia smiled, reaching down to tuck a strand of hair behind her daughter's ear. "I'll set my alarm extra early. 6 o'clock okay with you, Pancake Inspector?" "Perfect," Marley giggled, her whole face lighting up. "I'll wear my special chef hat." After tucking Marley in, reading 2 stories and checking under the bed for monsters, finding none, as usual, Olivia set her phone alarm, double-checking the time. 6 a.m., plenty of time for pancake making before the day began in earnest, before they stepped into whatever challenges awaited. In his riverside cottage at 9, with cricket song filtering through the partially open window, Ethan sat at his small desk, reading First State Bank's hastily issued statement posted on their website. "We are reviewing our lending policies regarding transitional housing addresses." He shook his head, rubbing his tired eyes before whispering into the quiet room. "Come on, do the right thing. It's not that hard." Standing, he crossed to the upright piano against the wall, running his fingers along its polished surface before sitting on the bench. Ben's old lyric sheet, creased and coffee-stained with a thumbprint in the corner, settled onto the music rack. His fingers found the opening notes of Amazing Grace. Hesitant at first, then gaining confidence, playing it through once, letting the familiar melody carry memories of his brother's voice through the night air and out across the river, where they dissolved into darkness like prayers sent skyward. Dawn painted the kitchen in soft shades of pink as Olivia stood at the stove, spatula poised over a sizzling pancake. The clock on the microwave blinked 6:15 a.m., The sweet smell of butter and maple syrup filled their small apartment. At the kitchen table, Marley sat cross-legged on her chair, coloured markers spread before her as she worked on a bright poster. "How do you spell welcome?" she asked, tongue stuck out in concentration. "Welcome," Olivia answered, flipping a perfectly golden pancake. "That looks wonderful, honey." Marley beamed at her creation. "You can fix it," written in rainbow letters, surrounded by drawn hammers and hearts. "It's for the center door," she explained proudly. The school day passed in a pleasant blur of art classes and multiplication tables. When the final bell rang at 3:30 p.m., Olivia gathered her teaching supplies quickly, knowing they had a big evening ahead. By 4:30 p.m., she and Marley were heading to the center, loaded down with their bent coat rack and a plastic bag full of assorted screws Olivia had collected over the years. "Never know when you might need the right size," she explained to Marley, who nodded seriously. The center hummed with pre-event energy. At 5 p.m., volunteers moved with purpose, brewing large urns of coffee, stirring enormous pots of vegetable soup, setting out mismatched mugs and bowls. The familiar scents of coffee and homemade soup wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Ethan arrived wearing his usual work boots and carrying 2 toolboxes. He moved through the space with quiet efficiency, organizing distinct areas. A long table for repairs, complete with tools laid out in neat rows. A corner with computers where 2 veterans in pressed shirts waited to help with resumes. And near the piano, a simple wooden box labeled "Grudges, leave them here," with paper and pencils nearby. "For the things we need to let go," he explained softly when Olivia raised an eyebrow. By 5:45 p.m., people began streaming in, teenagers with broken bike chains, elderly ladies clutching temperamental toasters, young parents with resumes and hope in their eyes. Marley's colourful sign welcomed them all. The first Fix-It Friday officially began at 6:10 p.m. Mr. Chen, a retired electrician, showed 2 high school students how to diagnose a faulty toaster. "See here?" he said, pointing with a screwdriver. "The heating element's just loose. Simple fix, once you know what to look for." At the resume table, Olivia sat with Sarah, a young mother of 3. "You've got amazing experience," Olivia encouraged, helping her rephrase her volunteer work at the school carnival into event planning skills. "Let's make sure employers see that." Miss Alvarez's voice rose above the busy hum at 7 p.m. "Time for our songs," she called out. Tools were set down, conversations paused, and voices joined together in "Lean on Me," followed by "Amazing Grace." The harmony wasn't perfect, but the spirit filled every corner of the room. At 7:45 p.m., phones started buzzing. The bank had posted a statement. "After valuable community feedback, First State Bank is reversing our address-based lending restrictions. We're launching a pilot microloan program, partnering with ethical advisors to serve all our neighbors." Cheers erupted, spreading like wildfire through the room. Later, as the crowd thinned, Olivia found herself beside Ethan at the sink, both of them washing coffee mugs in comfortable silence. Steam rose between them. "My brother Ben found help here once," Ethan said quietly, hands moving steadily through the soapy water. Before I knew how to help him myself." Olivia handed him a dry dish towel. "The center held me together this winter," she admitted. "After Tom died, Thursday suppers were sometimes the only thing that got us out of the apartment." Their eyes met briefly. No romance, no pressure, just understanding. "We'll keep building," Ethan said simply. "Yes," Olivia agreed. "We will." They worked side by side until 9:10 p.m., stacking chairs, wiping tables, sweeping floors. The familiar routine felt different somehow, more purposeful, more permanent. Pastor Ruth locked the doors at 9:40 p.m. They stood together on the sidewalk, a small group of tired but satisfied people. Olivia took Marley's hand, ready for their walk home. The little girl's eyes were heavy with happy exhaustion. Ethan remained on the sidewalk as they dispersed, gazing up at the patched roof barely visible in the streetlight glow. "Hold," he whispered to the old building, a prayer and a promise wrapped in one word. The week unfolds like a gentle river, each day carrying its own small moments of hope and healing, tiny miracles blooming in unexpected corners of their struggling town. Saturday morning brings the usual cleanup crew, their familiar faces greeting one another with coffee-warmed smiles. Volunteers sweep floors and sort donations while golden sunlight streams through freshly washed windows, casting hopeful patterns across the worn linoleum. Ethan checks the roof patches with methodical precision, his calloused fingers testing each seal before nodding with satisfaction at how they've held against recent rain. He makes mental notes of places that might need attention before winter, his mind already calculating materials and hours. Sunday, the center stands quiet except for the evening recovery meeting, the building seeming to hold its breath in anticipation of new beginnings. At 5 p.m., folding chairs scrape against linoleum as people gather in a circle, their faces lined with both weariness and determination as they share stories of struggle and triumph. Some speak in whispers, others with trembling voices that grow stronger with each word. The coffee pot burbles in the corner, a constant companion to their courage, filling the room with its rich aroma that somehow smells like both comfort and possibility. Monday arrives with its familiar rhythms, the start of another work week bringing both challenge and purpose. Children spill into the center after school, backpacks bouncing and voices echoing off the walls as they rush to Olivia's art class. Her smile welcomes each one by name. "Today we're making paper cranes," she announces, her gentle hands demonstrating the folds with practiced patience. Each one carries a wish. In Japan, there's a legend that if you fold 1,000 cranes, your wish comes true. The kids work with intense concentration, tongues caught between teeth, their small hands creating wings from paper, transforming flat squares into creatures that seem almost ready to take flight. Marley helps the younger children, her fingers guiding theirs through difficult folds, her explanations clearer than her mother's. Tuesday's choir practice fills the space with music that seeps into every corner, lifting spirits and healing invisible wounds. Ms. Alvarez leads them through hymns old and new, her expressive hands conducting joy into being, pulling harmony from unlikely voices. In the back row, an elderly man who rarely speaks sings with surprising strength, his weathered face transformed. Ethan, working quietly in the storage room, pauses to listen before quietly submitting an online order for safety equipment. Exit lights that won't flicker, a fire extinguisher to replace the expired one in the kitchen, smoke detectors with 10-year batteries. His generosity remains anonymous, a silent investment in their collective future. Wednesday brings the Senior Tech Help Hour, bridging generations through the language of technology. Teenagers with infinite patience show elderly neighbors how to video chat with grandchildren, their heads bent together over smartphones and tablets, laughter erupting when mistakes create unexpected results. "Look," Mrs. Johnson exclaims, her wrinkled face illuminated by blue screen light. "There's my grandbaby in California." Her eyes shine with tears as tiny fingers reach towards the screen from 3,000 miles away. The teenagers exchange glances of quiet satisfaction, understanding they've delivered something far more valuable than technical instruction. Thursday morning, bright flyers appear around town like yellow butterflies, taped to storefront windows and community bulletin boards. Community Center Rededication Concert, Saturday at 6 p.m. All welcome. The simple announcement sparks conversations at checkout lines and coffee counters. Meanwhile, Marley practices her speech during breakfast, lunch, and dinner, wearing down her mother's patience with endless repetitions. "This place means family." She rehearses earnestly while brushing her teeth, even when you're sad or your toaster's broken. Olivia helps her find the right words, amazed at how her daughter distills complex emotions into simple truths. Each evening at 9 p.m., after Marley finally surrenders to sleep, Olivia sits at her kitchen table, grading art projects under the warm glow of a table lamp. Red check marks and encouraging notes flow from her pen across colorful papers. Beautiful colors. Great imagination. Keep creating. The familiar routine grounds her, even as excitement builds for Saturday's concert. Sometimes she pauses, pencil hovering over paper, to imagine what the future might hold. Not just for the community center, but for her own heart that's beginning to remember how hope feels. Friday afternoon at 3:00 p.m., Pastor Ruth sits in her office, reading through old intake records with a steaming mug of tea beside her. These yellowing cards represent real people with real needs, some met, some still waiting. Her finger traces a line on Ben Vale's card. Referral denied. County program funds depleted. She closes the folder gently, adding it to her mental list of conversations for another day. Prayers that need answers beyond what good intentions can provide. She knows better than most how systems fail people, and how people sometimes surprise systems. By 6 p.m., the second Fix-It Friday buzzes with activity, the atmosphere electric with purpose. More neighbors have come this week, word having spread about last week's success, bringing broken lamps and wounded hopes in equal measure. The air smells of coffee, machine oil, and possibility. On a table near the entrance, a cardboard box overflows with colorful paper cranes made by Monday's art class. A hand-lettered sign in Marley's careful printing reads, "Take one, leave one, share your wish," inviting everyone to participate in this paper exchange of dreams. Mr. Chen, retired electrician with hands that still move with perfect precision despite arthritis, teaches a teenage boy with troubled eyes how to rewire a table lamp. "See how the current flows?" he explains, pointing to copper wires with a screwdriver. "Everything connects, just like people. Break one connection, nothing works. Fix it, light returns." The boy nods, face serious with concentration, absorbing wisdom that extends beyond electrical circuits. At the resume table, two veterans in matching service caps help a young woman translate her military experience into civilian terms, their encouragement gentle but firm as she struggles to see her own value. "Leadership," one suggests, tapping the paper with a weathered finger. "Project management under pressure." The woman straightens her shoulders slightly, beginning to recognize her own strength reflected in their eyes. Ethan moves between repair stations like a quiet guardian, lending tools and expertise where needed, his wealth disguised by worn jeans and practical knowledge. He pauses to help Marley oil a squeaky door hinge, kneeling to her level with genuine interest in her observations. "Sometimes," he tells her, demonstrating the proper technique, "the smallest fixes make the biggest difference. Listen." The door swings silently now. "That's the sound of something working right again." Marley nods seriously, absorbing the lesson about both doors and life. Olivia ladles homemade vegetable soup into mismatched bowls and listens to stories that unfold between sips. A mother with tired eyes tells her about a job interview next week, hope and fear tangled in her voice. An elderly man shares faded photos of his great-grandchildren, naming each one with pride. Each conversation weaves another thread into the community fabric, strengthening what once was fraying. Ms. Alvarez leads the evening songs at 7:00 p.m., her voice strong and sure, transforming the repair space into something sacred. The music wraps around them all, those fixing, those being fixed, those simply being present, binding them together in harmony that feels both fragile and unbreakable. The paper crane box slowly empties as people choose wishes to take home, examining each one carefully before selecting. New cranes appear throughout the evening, each one carrying someone's hopes. Peace, work, health, family, courage, love. The wishes accumulate like prayers, collective yearnings taking flight on paper wings. As 9:30 p.m. approaches, chairs are stacked and tools put away, the community center transforming back into itself, ready for tomorrow's celebration. Olivia stands at the door, keys in hand, saying goodnight to each person by name. "See you tomorrow at 6 for the concert," she reminds everyone who passes, her smile tired but genuine. The words hold both promise and invitation. Another chance to gather, to heal, to build something lasting from all these broken pieces made whole. Neighbors disperse into the night, carrying fixed items and paper cranes, each person a small light moving through the darkness toward home, bearing sparks of hope that weren't there when they arrived. Saturday morning dawns bright and full of promise. At precisely 9 a.m., volunteers stream into the community center, their footsteps echoing with purpose across the worn linoleum floors. Metal chairs scrape and clatter as they're arranged in neat rows, creating an impromptu concert hall in the familiar space. "Mind the cables," Ethan calls out, kneeling to secure thick black cords with strips of grey gaffer tape. His movements are precise, each piece laid with care to prevent any trips or falls. The newly polished piano gleams under the fluorescent lights as two veterans carefully roll it to center stage, their movements slow and deliberate. Throughout the morning, the room transforms. Handmade paper cranes dangle from fishing line near the windows, catching light and casting tiny shadows that dance across the walls. Children's artwork lines the hallway, a gallery of hope rendered in crayon and construction paper. At noon, Ethan returns with audio equipment tucked under his arms. "Nothing fancy," he explains to Pastor Ruth, "but it'll help the voices carry." He connects speakers with the same gentle attention he gives to piano repairs, testing each connection twice. Ms. Alvarez settles at a folding table, carefully reviewing the program drafts. Her printer hums steadily as she produces stack after stack of simple white papers. The order is elegantly straightforward. The choir will open with "Amazing Grace," followed by their special piece, "Voices of Thanks." Then comes the hymn, a segment featuring children demonstrating their note-reading skills, Olivia's remarks, and a final hymn to close the evening. "Perfect," she murmurs, paper clipping sets together. Simple but meaningful. The afternoon hours tick by in a blur of final preparations. Marley helps arrange programs on chairs, taking special care to align each one perfectly with the seat edge. Olivia moves through the space, adjusting details, straightening a frame here, centering a vase of donated flowers there. At 5:45 p.m., the first guests arrive. They come in twos and threes, filling the room with quiet chatter and anticipation. Seniors who've attended programs for decades sit beside young families new to the neighborhood. The man whose toaster was fixed last Friday gives a friendly nod to the teenager who helped repair it. By 6:15 p.m., the room glows with both artificial light and natural warmth. Pastor Ruth steps to the front, her familiar presence drawing all eyes. "Welcome," she says, her voice carrying easily to the back row. "Welcome to this place that belongs to all of us." The choir rises, their voices blending in familiar harmony. Ms. Alvarez conducts with graceful hands, shaping the music like clay. In the third row, an elderly woman dabs at her eyes with a tissue. When it's time for Ben's hymn, Ms. Alvarez gently coaxes Ethan to the piano bench. He sits, takes a breath and begins to play. His hands move steadily across the keys despite the dampness in his eyes. The melody rises, the same one that once carried through darkness during the power outage, now floating through light. Olivia steps forward after the music fades, holding a small stack of papers. Her voice is clear as she reads thank you notes from the community. A child's crayon scrawl. Thank you for helping me with math. An elder's shaky handwriting. This place remembers me. Then Marley's words, simple and profound. This place is where my mum breathes. The final hymn concludes at 7:20 p.m., its last notes hanging in the air like a benediction. As people begin to gather their things, Ethan and Olivia collect discarded programs, carrying them to the recycling bin behind the building. In the growing dusk, they stand near the bin, maintaining a respectful distance. The conversation turns to grief, that constant companion they both know too well. I talk to my husband when I fold laundry. Olivia admits softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nods, understanding. I talk to my brother when I fix things. They don't move closer, don't reach out, but something shifts in the space between them, a recognition, perhaps, or a shared exhale. Sunday at 3? Ethan asks, to plan the River of Names remembrance. Yes, Olivia agrees, for next Saturday. Inside, the last chairs are being stacked, metal legs clicking against each other. By 8:30 p.m., the building stands quiet, holding the evening's memories in its walls. They part ways under the streetlights, Ethan heading toward his riverside cottage, Olivia walking home to where Marley waits. Both carry the night's music with them, a gentle balm against old wounds, a reminder that healing comes in many forms. Sunday morning wraps the town in gentle quiet. Sunlight sparkles on the river's surface, creating diamond patterns that dance and shift with each ripple. Birds call from the trees lining the riverbank, their songs carrying over the water. At 1 o'clock, Olivia and Marley make their way down to the riverside, carrying 2 empty canvas bags. The afternoon air is warm but not hot, perfect for stone collecting. Marley runs ahead, her sneakers crunching on the gravelly path. "Look, Mom!" she calls out, holding up a perfectly smooth grey stone. "This one's shaped like a heart." Olivia smiles, kneeling beside her daughter. "That's perfect, honey. We need ones that are easy to paint on." They work their way along the water's edge, carefully selecting stones. Some are slate grey, others have swirls of cream or hints of rose quartz. Each one they choose is smooth enough to hold paint, large enough to write a name, but small enough to fit comfortably in a hand. "Why are we collecting so many?" Marley asks, her bag already half full. "Because lots of people will want to remember someone," Olivia explains gently. "Everyone has someone they want to honor." At 3 o'clock sharp, Olivia spots Ethan and Pastor Ruth waiting by the river path entrance. Marley waves enthusiastically, proud to show them her collection of stones. "These are beautiful choices," Pastor Ruth says, examining one of the smoother rocks. "Perfect for our purpose." They find a wooden bench overlooking the water and spread out their planning materials. Ethan has brought a notebook and some printed permit applications. Pastor Ruth carries a folder of ideas for prayer cards. "So we'll gather here next Saturday at 5. Pastor Ruth begins, making notes. A sacred space to remember both those we've lost and those who found help when they needed it most. They work out the details together. Ms. Alvarez will lead 2 hymns, one to open, one to close. Pastor Ruth will create prayer cards with gentle words of remembrance and hope. Olivia will set up a table where children can help paint stones, making sure the activity feels meaningful rather than merely crafty. "I'll handle the permits for the path," Ethan offers, already filling out the necessary paperwork. "We'll want to block off this section for privacy during the ceremony." The planning flows smoothly, each person contributing ideas while respecting the solemnity of the occasion. They decide on simple white paint for the names, allowing the natural beauty of the stones to show through. At 5 o'clock, as they're gathering their things, Olivia's phone buzzes. Her face tightens slightly as she reads the email from Councilman Darius's office. They want to do a routine safety inspection of the center on Tuesday at 10. She says, looking up at Pastor Ruth and Ethan. Routine doesn't usually come with quotation marks. Pastor Ruth squares her shoulders. Then we'll be ready and welcoming. Everything is up to code. Ethan made sure of that. We have nothing to hide. I'll be there, Ethan says quietly, his voice steady. Sometimes the best defense is simple transparency. They pack up their materials, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the river path. Olivia forwards the email to both of them before heading home with Marley, who's still clutching her favorite heart-shaped stone. At 6:30, their small apartment fills with the comforting smell of grilled cheese sandwiches. Marley sits at their kitchen counter, swinging her legs as she watches her mother flip the sandwiches to golden brown perfection. Can I paint Daddy's name on one of the stones? She asks suddenly. Olivia pauses, spatula mid-flip. Of course you can, sweetheart. We'll pick out a special one just for him. They eat their sandwiches together, talking about the week ahead. By 9 o'clock, with Marley tucked into bed, Olivia spreads her lesson plans across the kitchen table. She works steadily, planning art projects that will help her students express their own stories. Meanwhile, in his riverside cottage, Ethan sits at his small desk. The lamp casts a warm circle of light as he opens a notebook. His pen moves slowly across the page as he writes. If this becomes a fight, choose the path that leaves mercy behind you. He places the notebook carefully beside Ben's sobriety coin, the metal catching the lamplight. At 10:15, he turns off the lamp. Through his window, the sound of the river remains constant, steady, unwavering, like the truth they're all trying to protect. Monday morning dawns cool and clear. Olivia stands at the front of her classroom, surrounded by eager faces and the smell of tempera paint. Sunlight streams through the windows, casting warm rectangles across the colorful classroom floor. The walls are adorned with student artwork from previous lessons, bright, joyful creations that transform the space. She's drawn 3 overlapping circles on the whiteboard, red, blue, and yellow, their edges crisp against the clean white surface. Today we're going to learn about how colors work together, she explains, pointing to where the circles meet, her voice gentle but animated. When 2 primary colors mix, they create something new, something neither color could be on its own. Her students lean forward, fascinated as she demonstrates how blue and yellow make green, red and blue create purple, and yellow and red blend into orange. The colors swirl and merge on her demonstration paper, creating something beautiful from simple ingredients. She walks between the tables, helping tiny hands mix colors on paper plates, offering encouragement with a touch on a shoulder or a quiet word of praise. Like magic, one little girl exclaims as her brush swirls blue into yellow, her eyes wide with wonder as the green appears beneath her fingertips. More like science, Olivia smiles, kneeling beside her. But yes, it feels magical every time. That's why I love teaching art. We get to make little miracles every day. During her lunch break, while eating a simple sandwich at her desk, she pulls up an art supply website on her phone. The teacher's lounge would offer company, but today she needs to focus. She carefully selects white paint pens, checking reviews to ensure they'll work well on river stones, making sure to order enough for Saturday's river ceremony. Her finger hovers over the express shipping option before clicking it, worth the extra cost to ensure they arrive in time. The confirmation email pings in her inbox, one more piece falling into place for the memorial. The afternoon finds her at the community centre, the familiar building welcoming her as she slips through the side entrance, meeting Pastor Ruth at 3:40. The older woman greets her with a quick hug that smells of lavender and paperwork. They work methodically through the kitchen, wiping down surfaces and checking expiration dates on donated food items. The rhythmic task of cleaning calms Olivia's nerves about tomorrow's inspection. Everything's organized by date, Pastor Ruth notes, adjusting some canned goods on the metal shelving. Her efficient movements reveal years of careful stewardship. We've always been careful about that, even before all this fuss. Olivia nods, scrubbing a stubborn spot on the industrial sink until it gleams under the fluorescent lights. They won't find anything wrong here. We run a tight ship. Her words carry conviction, though worry still lurks beneath them. This place matters too much to too many people. At 5:10, Ethan arrives wearing his usual work clothes and carrying his toolbox, its metal surface scratched from years of use. No one would guess the hands that grip it belong to a billionaire. He moves purposefully through the building, replacing 2 cracked outlet covers with new ones. The plastic covers look bright against the aged walls, small improvements that speak of care and attention. Standing on a stepladder, his movements precise and economical, he reaches up to test the fire alarm. The sharp beeping echoes through the building, confirming everything works as it should. He makes a note on his checklist, methodically working through each safety item, his face a mask of concentration that hides deeper thoughts. In a quiet moment, when he's alone in the hallway, he pulls out his phone and composes an email to his attorney. Please draft a memo on establishing a community land trust and gifting a building lot irrevocably to it. We may need a plan by week's end. Include options for anonymous donation if possible. The response comes quickly. They'll have options outlined by Wednesday afternoon. Ethan tucks his phone away, returning to his inspection checklist, his mind already calculating contingencies and possibilities. By 7 o'clock, the center fills with familiar voices as Ms. Alvarez, a retired music teacher with silver-streaked hair and boundless energy, gathers everyone for rehearsal. The chosen hymns are simple but meaningful, songs about remembrance and hope that don't require professional voices, just sincere hearts. She positions people carefully in the multi-purpose room, making sure everyone can see her conducting, arranging them by height and vocal range. Remember, she says, her voice gentle but firm, her hands poised to begin. We're not performing. We're helping people remember and heal. That's our only job on Saturday. They practice the songs several times, their voices blending in the evening light that streams through the windows, casting long shadows across the worn carpet. Even those who claim they can't carry a tune find their place in the harmony, encouraged by nods and supportive smiles from their neighbors. At 8:45, Olivia sits on her couch at home, Marley already asleep down the hall, her steady breathing audible in the quiet house. Outside, crickets provide gentle background music to her thoughts. She picks up her phone and texts Ethan. I'll be there by 9:30 tomorrow morning for the inspection. Everything looks good on our end. His reply comes quickly. I'll be there early. Don't worry, we've covered everything. The simple exchange carries weight. They both understand what's at stake. More than a building, it's the heart of their community, a lifeline for so many. Meanwhile, Pastor Ruth moves through the quiet building one last time. Her footsteps echo in the empty halls as she checks doors and windows. She prints out copies of every permit, every safety certificate, every inspection record. Each document goes into a clearly labeled folder, which she places prominently on the front desk where it can't be missed. She pauses before leaving, her hand resting on the folder. The building creaks softly around her, familiar and dear after so many years of service within its walls. They've done everything they can to prepare. Now they just have to wait and trust. That night, across town, people connected to the center try to sleep. Olivia checks her alarm twice, then lays out her clothes for tomorrow. Professional, but not pretentious. Pastor Ruth says an extra prayer, hands clasped tightly around her worn Bible. Ethan reviews his notes one more time before turning off his lamp, mentally rehearsing responses to potential problems. They're all a little restless, but ready. Tomorrow will bring what it brings, and they'll face it together, a community united by purpose and heart. Tuesday morning settles over the town with an uneasy weight. The air feels thick with anticipation as Ethan pulls into the center's parking lot at 9:20. His work boots crunch on loose gravel as he does his usual perimeter check. At the rear door, he stops short. The padlock hangs broken, its metal twisted and snapped. His stomach tightens as he pushes the door open carefully. Inside, stacks of boxes block the fire exit, boxes he's never seen before, arranged deliberately to obstruct the path. He pulls out his phone, takes several clear photos, making sure the timestamp shows. His fingers move quickly across the screen as he texts Pastor Ruth. "Come to back door, now." Pastor Ruth arrives within minutes, her usual calm demeanor hardening when she sees the scene. "This was deliberate," she says quietly, helping Ethan clear the boxes. They document everything, the position of the boxes, the broken lock, the cleared exit afterward. "Someone's trying to make us look negligent," Ethan says, his voice low and controlled. At 10:03, right on schedule, a grey sedan pulls up. The inspector steps out first, a woman in a crisp blazer carrying a tablet. Two aides follow with clipboards. Then, from the passenger side, Councilman Darius emerges, adjusting his tie with practiced precision. "Good morning," he says smoothly. "I hope you don't mind if I observe. Just doing my due diligence for the community." The inspection begins immediately. The inspector moves through the building efficiently, her face neutral as she makes notes. She checks exits, fire extinguishers, electrical panels. Her aides measure doorways and photograph corners. Darius trails behind, his expensive shoes clicking on the linoleum. His smile never quite reaches his eyes as he watches everyone's reactions. "You've made some recent repairs," the inspector notes, examining a new outlet cover. "Yes," Pastor Ruth responds. "We maintain everything promptly." The inspection wraps up by noon. The inspector's summary is brief. A few minor issues, worn carpet edges, a loose handrail, but nothing serious. As they leave, Darius lingers in the doorway. "Impressive operation you're running," he says, his words carrying an edge. "Very professional." The afternoon brings fresh challenges. At 2:00, phones start buzzing with notifications. An anonymous blog post appears, its accusations sharp and calculated. The writer suggests the center is merely a front for tax evasion, hinting at darker motives behind Ethan's involvement. But the real punch comes with a photo. Ethan and Olivia by the river after the concert, the angle making their innocent conversation appear intimate. The caption insinuates impropriety, twisting a moment of shared grief into something tawdry. Donations that had been steady begin to pause. Two regular volunteers send worried texts. "Maybe we should wait and see how this plays out. Don't want to get involved in anything complicated." At 4:15, Pastor Ruth finds the zoning notice taped to the front door. The paper feels heavy in her hands as she reads, "Emergency hearing. Friday, 4 p.m. Safety concerns cited." Olivia's phone rings at 5:00, her principal's name lighting up the screen. The conversation is brief but clear. "Keep your activism out of school hours. We can't risk controversy." In her car, Olivia allows herself exactly 2 minutes of tears. She counts them out, watching her dashboard clock tick from 5:12 to 5:14. Then she wipes her face with a tissue, checks her reflection, and heads inside. The after-school art students are waiting, and their creative joy deserves her full attention. She guides them through making paper butterflies, their small hands careful with scissors and glue. Sometimes the most beautiful things come from simple pieces, she tells them, helping a young boy fold his wings evenly. At 7 o'clock, Ethan sits alone in his cottage. Ben's sobriety coin catches the lamplight as he turns it over and over in his hands. No words come to his lips, but his heart pounds out a rhythm of determination and worry. Their phones light up with a group text chain, arranging tomorrow's meeting. They'll gather early before the day can throw any more surprises their way. Each response comes quickly. They're all still awake, all still fighting. Pastor Ruth. 8 a.m., my office. Olivia. I'll bring coffee. Ethan. I'll be there. Ms. Alvarez. Count me in. The night settles around them, each in their separate corners of town, connected by purpose and determination. Tomorrow will bring its own battles, but tonight they hold on to what they know is true. Their work matters, their community matters, and sometimes the strongest response to darkness is simply showing up again and again, carrying light. Wednesday morning brings a heavy sky and determined faces to the center's office. At 9 o'clock sharp, they gather around the scratched wooden table. Olivia with her teachers, notebook, Ethan in his familiar work boots, Pastor Ruth radiating calm authority, Ms. Alvarez carrying sheet music as always, two veterans, Jim and Mike, who've helped maintain the building for years, and Sarah, a 16-year-old volunteer who's grown up within these walls. First things first, Pastor Ruth says, spreading out Tuesday's photos of the tampered exit. We need to address this directly. We could file a complaint, Mike suggests, his military training evident in his precise speech. Document the break-in, press charges. Or go to the media, Sarah adds, phone in hand. I know some local bloggers who'd tell our side. Jim shakes his head. Fighting fire with fire just burns everything down faster. They sit with that wisdom for a moment. The wall clock ticks steadily, marking time as they consider their options. Outside, a garbage truck rumbles past, its familiar Tuesday morning route a reminder that ordinary life continues even in crisis. Pastor Ruth straightens in her chair, that particular gleam in her eye that usually precedes her best ideas. What if we did something completely different? She pauses, making sure she has everyone's attention. What if we called it Audit in the Light? What do you mean? Olivia leans forward, interested. Thursday night, 6 p.m. We invite everyone, supporters, critics, council members, neighbors. We hang every receipt, every ledger, every volunteer sign-in sheet on clotheslines across the gym. Make it all visible. Answer every question. Hide nothing. The idea settles over the room like sunshine breaking through clouds. Ms. Alvarez nods slowly. Transparency as testimony. I'll need to make a statement, Ethan says quietly. His fingers trace the edge of the table as he continues. About why I stayed anonymous, about Ben. Olivia watches him, recognizing the courage this will take. Are you sure? Yes. He meets her eyes briefly. The truth is, I was ashamed, not of Ben, but of not saving him. And then I wanted to help without it becoming about me or my money, but hiding things, even for good reasons, it gave them a weapon. Pastor Ruth reaches for a legal pad. Let's make a plan. We'll need copies of everything. They divide tasks with efficient purpose. Sarah and Mike head to the copy shop with boxes of records. Jim starts measuring the gym for clothesline placement. Ms. Alvarez sorts through years of choir programs and concert receipts, each one a testament to music's healing power. Olivia and Ethan work side by side at the old desktop computer, scanning documents and creating clear labels with timestamps. Their hands occasionally brush as they pass papers back and forth, but they maintain professional focus. There's too much at stake for distractions. Look at this, Olivia says softly around 3 o'clock, holding up a faded receipt. From the week after Tom's funeral, the centre bought art supplies for Marley's grief counselling group. Ethan nods, understanding. Keep it. That's exactly what people need to see. The real stories. The human impact. By late afternoon, the office walls are covered with organised stacks, utility bills, maintenance records, donation logs, volunteer hours. Pastor Ruth works on a simple statement explaining their mission and financial practices. At 5:30, Olivia checks her watch. I need to get Marley from after-school care. In the car, Marley notices her mother's thoughtful expression. Are you worried about the mean people, Mama? Olivia chooses her words carefully. Some people have questions about the centre. Tomorrow we're going to show them all our homework, every paper that shows how we help people. Like when I have to show my math work. Exactly like that, sweet girl. They stop for takeout dinner, a rare treat, and eat at their small kitchen table. Marley chatters about her day, while Olivia makes mental notes for her own statement tomorrow. At 8:30, after stories and prayers, Olivia tucks her daughter into bed. Back in her living room, Olivia opens her laptop. Her testimony flows easily. The meals that appeared when grief left her unable to cook, the children's art projects that gave Marley stability, the hymns that held her up when standing felt impossible. She writes about community that becomes family, about hope that arrives in casseroles and construction paper hearts. Meanwhile, in his riverside cottage, Ethan spreads the attorney's memo across his desk. The language is precise and powerful. Irrevocable transfer protects purpose. A community land trust could secure the centre's future beyond any individual's control, including his own. He doesn't make the decision yet. Instead, he places the memo carefully on his nightstand and sets his alarm for 5:30 tomorrow morning. The river whispers outside his window, constant and changing all at once, like the community he's slowly learning to join. The night settles over their town, over Olivia's apartment with its art supplies and grief memories, over Pastor Ruth's study filled with prayer cards and practical plans, over Ethan's cottage where past pain meets present purpose. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, but tonight they rest in the strength of truth and the power of showing up together. Thursday evening arrived with a mix of anticipation and nervous energy. The gymnasium of the Maple Street Community Center glowed under bright fluorescent lights, transformed by rows of clotheslines strung from wall to wall. Every document, receipt, and record hung like laundry in the light, nothing hidden, nothing held back. Pastor Ruth stood at the entrance, greeting each person with steady warmth. Welcome. Please take your time. Ask any questions you have. Ethan adjusted a crooked page, his work boots scuffing softly on the floor. He'd chosen to wear them tonight, not to hide, but to remind himself why he was here. Olivia moved between the rows, straightening clips and answering questions with patient clarity. The first neighbors arrived cautiously, some with arms crossed, others with open curiosity. They moved slowly through the makeshift aisles of transparency, pausing to read volunteer logs and study financial statements. At 6:30, Mike Thompson, a local contractor, cleared his throat. Folks, I need to say something. He held up several photographs. These so-called violations, they were staged. Look here, these pry marks on the padlock are fresh, made with a specific tool. And these scuff marks by the fire exit, they're inconsistent with normal wear and tear. Someone deliberately tampered with this building. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Councilman Darius, standing near the back, shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Alvarez stepped forward next, her silver hair catching the light. Her voice carried years of choir direction as she read from a simple notebook. This center opened in 1982. Since then, we've served over 50,000 meals, hosted 1,200 recovery meetings, taught 3,000 children to read music, and never turned away anyone who needed help. The clock ticked toward 7. Ethan moved to the center of the room, his hands steady but his heart pounding. The silence deepened as people recognized who he was. "My name is Ethan Vale," he began softly. "I've been helping anonymously because I was ashamed. Not of giving, but of what I couldn't give. My brother Ben found hope in this building. He sang in the choir, attended meetings, felt loved here. But addiction took him anyway, and I couldn't save him." His voice caught slightly. "I still can't save him, but I can love the way he was loved here, openly, without hiding anymore." No one clapped. No one moved. The only sound was shared breathing, the holy quiet of truth being heard. Olivia stepped forward, holding a single sheet of paper. "After my husband died, I couldn't cook, couldn't shop, could barely breathe." Her voice was steady but vulnerable. This center fed us, not just food, though the casseroles helped, but with purpose, with community, with art supplies for Marley and hymns that gave me strength to stand. As if on cue, Marley tugged her mother's sleeve and pointed to the large feelings map she'd created. "See this bright spot? This gold part? That's the day I felt safe again. Right here, when Ms. Alvarez taught me to play Twinkle Twinkle on the piano." Questions followed, each answered with specific detail and honesty. "How many volunteer hours last month?" 212, documented in the log. "What percentage goes to overhead?" 8.3%, shown in the annual audit. "Who maintains the building?" A combination of licensed contractors and skilled volunteers, all documented with dates and signatures. By 8 o'clock, the tension had shifted to something softer. People lingered over photographs of holiday meals, children's art projects, graduation ceremonies from various programs. "Tomorrow's city hearing is at 4. Pastor Ruth reminded everyone as they began to leave. "You're all welcome to attend." When the last visitor had gone, Ethan gathered Pastor Ruth and Olivia near the piano. "I've been working with my attorneys," he said quietly. "There's something called a community land trust, a way to protect this place permanently, beyond any one person's control." Pastor Ruth's eyes brightened. "That's permanent kindness." "It is," Olivia agreed softly. "That's exactly what it is." Ethan nodded, not making promises aloud, but feeling the rightness of it settle in his bones. Later that night, walking along the river path, Ethan held Ben's sobriety coin in his palm. The metal had warmed to his touch, smooth from years of worried fingers. The water moved steadily beside him, constant and changing, like the work ahead. "Okay," he whispered to the night, to his brother's memory, to whatever power held them all. "We do this." The City Hall chamber buzzed with tension at 3:45 Friday afternoon. Sunlight slanted through tall windows, catching dust motes as people filled every seat and lined the walls. Seniors from the center's lunch program sat beside teenagers who attended after-school art classes. Small business owners nodded to veterans they knew from Fix-It Fridays. At exactly 4 o'clock, the council chair called the emergency hearing to order. The room settled into an expectant hush. The building inspector rose first, adjusting his tie. "After thorough examination, I found only minor issues, all of which have already been corrected. The facility meets safety codes." Mike Thompson, the contractor, approached the podium next. His work-worn hands spread photographs across the council's desk. "These marks on the padlock and exit door show clear evidence of tampering. The damage pattern is inconsistent with normal wear. Someone deliberately created these hazards." As he finished, Councilman Darius leaned forward with a practiced smile. "Isn't it convenient that a billionaire swooped in to save, if I may speak?" Ms. Alvarez's quiet voice cut through his insinuation. She stood, elegant in her choir director's posture, holding a worn folder. Years ago, a frightened teenager came to our center. He was hungry and ashamed. We fed him, clothed him, helped him apply to college. Her eyes swept the room. We never asked his name before helping. We never shamed anyone for needing help. That's who we are. The silence that followed felt heavy with understanding. Several people glanced at Darius, who had gone very still. Ethan Vale rose then, carrying a slim leather folder. His steps to the lectern were steady, though his hands trembled slightly as he opened the documents. "I've spent weeks working with attorneys to create something permanent," he began. "The Maple Street property and building have been transferred irrevocably to the newly formed Maple Street Community Trust." A murmur rippled through the crowd as he continued. "The trust will be governed locally by a board including Pastor Ruth, 2 neighborhood elders, Ms. Alvarez and Mr. Rodriguez, small business owner Sarah Chen, and a youth representative elected yearly by the Teen Volunteer Program." He placed the executed deed and trust documents on the council's desk. "I ask the council to recognize the trust's stewardship and affirm the operating permit." For a long moment, no one moved. Then someone sniffled. Another person wiped their eyes. Soon there were few dry eyes in the chamber as people stood, even those who'd come ready to argue. The motion passed by unanimous roll call. Before adjournment, Darius stood. His face was ashen as he announced his immediate resignation, pending investigation into the development firm's conduct. By 6 o'clock that evening, the community had gathered along the river path for the planned River of Names ceremony. The late spring air was soft with possibility as people collected smooth stones from baskets, carefully painting names with metallic pens. Ethan knelt at the water's edge, a stone bearing Ben Vale in his trembling hand. Olivia appeared beside him, her steady hand covering his as they placed it together. No words were needed. Ms. Alvarez's voice rose in the first notes of a hymn. Others joined, their voices carrying across the water as the sun began to set. After the second hymn faded, people lingered, sharing quiet stories about the names they'd honored. Back at the center, Pastor Ruth announced a gentle change. "Starting next week, Fix-It Fridays will become Carry Each Other Night. Same soup, same songs, same spirit of helping, just a new name for this new chapter." The evening wound down naturally. At 8:45, Olivia turned the key in the lock, testing the handle as she always did. Ethan waited at the bottom of the steps, hands in his pockets. Their exchange was simple. "See you Friday," she said. "See you Friday," he replied. Inside the locked building, the old piano held its tune, steady and true. Around it, the town settled into its new rhythm, where kindness had become policy, and hope was as ordinary as breathing.